The door clicked shut behind my daughter, and I wasn't even in the house to hear it. I found that out later. By the time I pulled into Vernell's driveway, the part that mattered most had already happened without me. My name is Octavia. I want you to remember that because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why I never said it out loud to half the people sitting at that table, including the part where the company that pays their bills is one I built into a $48.6 million business they don't even know I own. Kira had been excited about that dinner for 2 weeks. She picked out a green parka herself, insisted on wearing it even inside the house because she said it made her look like she belonged. 11 years old and already working that hard to belong somewhere. It started over a video game. Trevon's boy, 16 and mouthy, lost a round and shoved Kira into the wall. "You ain't even real family," he said, not loud, just flat, like he was stating a fact everybody already agreed on. Vernell laughed. That's the part I keep circling back to. She laughed. The way you laugh at something mildly funny, not something that just made a child's whole body flinch. "Go on outside and cool off, baby," she told Kira. "It's just a joke." Then she reached over, unzipped that green parka right off my daughter's shoulders, and said something about not wanting it dirty if there was any rolling around. She walked Kira to the back door herself, closed it behind her. It was 8 degrees that night. I know because I checked my phone twice on the drive over, debating whether Kira would need her hat for the walk from the car. Dwayne was in the next room. He told me later he heard the door, heard crying through the wall, thin and getting thinner. He said he figured she'd come back in on her own. He didn't get up. Quick thing, if you're watching this, drop in the comments what time it is, where you are right now. I always want to know who's sitting with me through these. I left work early that day, specifically to be there for the meal. 40 minutes after that door closed, I was still in traffic on the interstate, with no idea any of this was happening. A neighbor 2 houses down noticed her porch light catching something small and shaking near the fence line. She said Kira wasn't crying anymore by the time she got to her, just standing there, arms wrapped around herself, lips a color they shouldn't have been. That's where I found my daughter. Wrapped in a stranger's blanket, sitting on a stranger's couch while inside Vernell's house, 20 feet away, the whole family was still eating like nothing had happened. I didn't scream. I want to be honest about that, because people expect screaming and I didn't have it in me. I carried Kira to the car, buckled her in myself, and drove off without saying a word to anybody still standing in that doorway. Dwayne caught up to us in the driveway, said my name once. I didn't roll the window down. Kira fell asleep before we hit the highway, worn out the way kids get after crying themselves empty. I sat at a red light somewhere past the second exit, looking at her in the rearview mirror, and something in me went very still and very quiet. I pulled out my laptop right there at that intersection, not to message anybody, not to vent. I logged into the employee database for Celine Industries, the company whose paychecks had been keeping that entire family afloat for years, the company not one of them knew I owned. And I started searching for every Boykin name on the payroll. The light turned green. I didn't move yet. Kira was asleep down the hall by the time I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a cup of coffee I never touched. 2 in the morning has a particular kind of quiet. No traffic outside, no phone buzzing, nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and my own thinking, which that night was louder than both. My father built roofs for 31 years. Quiet man, slow to anger, slower to trust. When I was 19 and trying to get a warehouse lease approved with nothing but a business plan and nerve, he was the one who co-signed the loan. sat across from a banker in a suit 2 sizes too big for him, and signed his name without blinking. In the truck afterward, he didn't say congratulations. He said, "Money talked about is money that gets taken." Told me his own brother had borrowed against their mother's house once everybody found out. He'd come into a little something and never paid a cent of it back. "Live simple," he told me. "Let them guess wrong about you. Guessing wrong keeps people honest." I built Celine Industries on that sentence, hired a CEO to be the face of it, kept my name off everything but the deed and the filings nobody thinks to read, drove a 6-year-old Camry to board meetings I never physically had to attend. I never planned for that lesson to mean watching my own daughter freeze outside a house while people who depend on my company for their mortgage payments sat inside laughing. At that table, I pulled up the personnel roster for the Pineville hub, the warehouse and dispatch center closest to Vernell's house. I typed in Boykin and watched the names load one after another. Vernell, Trevon, Tamika. 3 different last paychecks, 3 different households, all of them sitting downstream of a company they thought belonged to some man named Whitcomb they'd never met, because that's the name on the door. I wasn't looking for anything when I started. I was just looking. The way you check a wound to see how deep it actually runs. Then I found the flag. A write-up, dated 14 months back. Vernell's name on it. A complaint from a coworker about her treatment of a temp employee. Something about being condescending in front of customers. Repeated more than once according to the note. Standard procedure says 2 write-ups inside a year trigger a formal review. There wasn't one. I scrolled further and found a second flag, 3 months after the first. Same pattern. Same lack of follow-up. Somebody had filed both reports properly and then both had simply stopped moving, like water hitting a wall instead of a drain. I sat back in my chair. My father used to say, "People show you who they are long before you're ready to believe it." I'd been looking at this woman through Dwayne's eyes for 9 years. Difficult, opinionated, set in her ways. Not once had I looked at her through a stranger's eyes, through the eyes of whoever filed that first complaint and then watched nothing happen. I closed the laptop a little after 3. Not because I was done, because I needed to know who had buried those files and why. I didn't sleep that night. By 6 in the morning, I had the employee handbook pulled up on my laptop, the same handbook I'd written the foreword for years ago and never actually read past page 1. I went looking for something specific. I found it on page 43, under a header most employees skip past without thinking twice. Duty of care disclosure. Any employee under active investigation by Child Protective Services or named in a founded welfare concern involving a minor is required to self-report to Human Resources within 5 business days. Standard language. The kind of clause that exists because some insurance company somewhere demanded it, not because anybody expected to use it. I read it 3 times. Nobody had called CPS yet. Not me, not the neighbor, not anyone, as far as I knew. But if they did, this clause meant Vernell would be required to walk into her own HR office and say it out loud. Not me forcing anything. Just paper. Doing what paper does. I sat with that for a long time before I picked up my phone. Walter Greaves had been Celine's HR director for 6 years. I'd met him twice, both times in passing, both times introduced only as Octavia, from ownership, which in a company that size means almost nothing to anybody who isn't looking closely. I called from a blocked number, kept my voice flat, and a half step higher than usual. "Mr. Greaves, hi. I'm doing an internal ownership audit on the Pineville location, just confirming some compliance language. Can you walk me through how the duty of care disclosure policy actually gets enforced on your end?" There was a pause, longer than the question called for. "Sure," he said slowly. If an employee's flagged through a county filing, our system cross-checks it against active staff, generates an internal report, requires sign-off before any action's taken. Sign-off from who? Another pause. This one felt different, measured. Ownership usually. Sometimes legal. A beat. Can I ask who I'm speaking with? Just doing the audit, I said. Something in his tone shifted, quieter now, like he was choosing each word with more care than the conversation required. Most people doing a routine audit call from the main line, not a blocked number. And most people doing a routine audit don't ask follow-up questions like that. My stomach dropped slightly, though I kept my voice even. It's a thorough audit. I'm sure it is, he said. Then, after a pause long enough that I almost spoke, just to fill it. Ms. Renfro. I didn't say anything. I've known who you are for a while now, he said, gently, like he was handing me something fragile instead of dropping a weight on my chest. 3 years, give or take. I'm not in the habit of announcing it. Wasn't sure you'd want me to. The room felt smaller than it had 30 seconds earlier. How? I managed. Did you? That's a longer conversation? He said. One I don't think either of us wants to have over the phone. I sat there holding my own cell phone like it had just told me something about myself I didn't know yet. I called him back an hour later from my actual number. No point pretending anymore. How? I said again, no preamble this time. Greaves exhaled, the kind of sound a man makes when he's been waiting years to set something down. Signature audit. 3 years ago, legal had me cross-check every authorization on file against our insurance carrier's records after a claim got disputed. Your name came up exactly once, buried under the holding company. Most people wouldn't have caught it. I caught it. And you didn't say anything. What was there to say? You'd built it so nobody would know? Wasn't my business to undo that. I sat down at my kitchen counter, phone pressed hard against my ear. Walter, I need you to tell me exactly what you mean by that. A pause, then slower. There've been complaints over the years. About the Pineville hub. About a few of your husband's family specifically. Small things. Mostly. Tone with customers. Attitude with temps. I made some of them go quiet before they reached a formal stage. My chest tightened. Why would you do that? Because I figured a woman who hides what she owns from her own family doesn't want her name attached to firing them either. I thought I was protecting you. He let that sit a second. I see now I might have been wrong about what protecting you actually looked like. I thought about Vernell's file. 2 flags, 14 months apart. Both stopped cold, like water hitting a wall. That complaint last year, I said quietly. About a temp employee. You buried that. I downgraded it. Didn't bury it exactly. There's a difference, even if it doesn't feel like one right now. It feels exactly like one, Walter. He didn't argue. I hung up without saying goodbye, which wasn't like me. But my hands needed something to do besides hold a phone that had just told me the one thing I thought I controlled completely. Who knew, who didn't, had never been fully mine to control at all. Somebody else had been making decisions in my name. Quiet decisions. Kind ones, even, in his mind. But not mine. I sat with that until the sound of small feet on the hallway floor pulled me out of it. Kira stood in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, hair still in the 2 braids I'd done that morning, holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear the way she only did when something was sitting wrong in her. Mama, she said. Quiet, testing the word before she committed to the rest of it. Is Grandma Vernell still mad at me? I felt something crack open in my chest, slow and total. Baby, why would you think that? She shrugged. The kind of shrug kids do when they've been turning a thing over alone and don't have the words yet for how heavy it's gotten. She said it was a joke, but she looked mad. Like I did something. Her voice dropped lower. Did I do something? I crossed the kitchen and knelt down so we were eye level, rabbit ear and all. No, I said. You didn't do anything, Kira. Not one thing. She nodded slowly, the way kids do when they want to believe you more than they actually do. She'd been carrying that alone since the night it happened, telling no one, not me, not Dwayne, not anyone, until tonight, standing in a kitchen doorway in her pajamas, finally asking the question out loud. Greaves called me back 2 days later, his voice careful in a way it hadn't been before. I need to ask you something directly, he said, and I need you to answer me as the owner, not as whatever you've been to me on these calls before. Go ahead. The neighbor who took your daughter in that night. She mentioned to a mutual friend she's considering filing something with the county. If that happens, it triggers the disclosure clause automatically. Vernell's name surfaces in our system whether anybody wants it to or not. He paused. I can soften how that lands. I've done it before. You know that now. Or I can let it move exactly the way it's written to move, no matter who it touches. I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at nothing in particular, turning the question over like a stone I didn't want to keep holding. Every part of me that had spent years building Celine quietly wanted to reach in and control the outcome, protect the family business reputation, manage the optics, decide in advance how hard the landing would be. That instinct ran deep, deeper than I liked admitting. But that instinct was the same one that had let 2 flags on Vernell's file disappear into nothing for over a year. Mercy applied selectively isn't mercy. It's just another kind of secret. Let it run, I said. Exactly as written. No softening, no acceleration, no warning to anybody in that family. If the policy means anything, it means the same thing for everyone it touches. Greaves was quiet for a second. You understand what that could mean. For her. For all of them. I understand it means the truth gets to make its own decision for once instead of you or me making it for everybody else. All right, he said. Then that's what happens. I hung up, feeling something settle in me that hadn't been still in days. Not peace, exactly, but the particular calm of having finally chosen a direction instead of drifting between 2 of them. Dwayne found me an hour later, still standing in that same spot by the window, phone face down on the counter. You've been on the phone a lot this week, he said, not quite a question, leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed. Work stuff. You don't even talk about work stuff usually. He studied me a second too long. You've been different since Christmas Eve. Quieter. On the phone. At weird hours. A pause, and then, almost gently, why do you care so much about that company all of a sudden? The question landed harder than he probably meant it to. For 1 full second, every part of it sat right there on my tongue. The holding company, my father's signature, Greaves and his 3 years of knowing, Vernell's buried file, all of it, ready to spill out in one breath that would end 9 years of careful silence in under a minute. I looked at him standing in that doorway, still the same man who'd heard our daughter crying through a wall and chosen not to move. It's complicated, I said instead, and turned back toward the window before he could see whatever was happening on my face. Dwayne went to his mother's place on a Saturday to help her move furniture for a church fundraiser she was hosting the following week. He didn't ask me to come. I didn't offer. He told me about it after, sitting at our kitchen table with his keys still in his hand, like he hadn't decided yet whether he was staying in the room or not. She brought up Christmas Eve, he said. I kept folding the laundry in front of me, didn't look up. And, said the whole thing got blown out of proportion. Said Kira wasn't out there but a few minutes, and kids exaggerate when they're tired and want attention. He said it flat, reporting it rather than defending it, but reporting it without correction is its own kind of agreement. Did you tell her how long Kira was actually out there? I didn't think it would help anything. I set the shirt down I was folding. Did you tell her how cold it was that night, Dwayne? Did you mention the part where a stranger had to wrap our daughter in a blanket because nobody in that house went looking for her? He didn't answer that directly. She's 71 years old, Octavia. I wasn't going to stand in her kitchen and tear into her. I'm not asking you to tear into her. I'm asking why you can defend her so easily and you couldn't say one word for your own daughter that night, or apparently since. Something flickered across his face. Not quite guilt. More like irritation at being made to look at something he'd rather leave covered. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. He was quiet for a second, then added, almost like an afterthought he hadn't meant to say out loud. She did ask me something strange, though. Wanted to know if I'd heard anything about changes coming at her job. Said something felt off lately. People acting funny around her at the hub. He looked at me a beat too long. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Why would I know anything about your mother's job? He shrugged. Let it drop. The way he let most things drop when pushing further might cost him something he wasn't ready to pay. I didn't bring up Kira again that night. There wasn't a point repeating myself to a man who'd already shown me, twice now, exactly where his loyalty settled when it mattered. Later, after dinner, I sat on the edge of Kira's bed while she colored and mentioned, as casually as I could manage, that her cousin's birthday party was coming up at Vernell's house the following weekend. Do you want to go? I asked. Kira didn't look up from her coloring book. No. You sure? It's your cousin's party, not… No, she said again. Firmer this time, still not looking at me, her crayon pressing harder into the page than the picture really needed. I felt the old instinct rise in me, the one that wanted to coax her gently toward going anyway, smooth things over, keep the peace the way I'd been taught my whole life to keep it. I didn't reach for it. Okay, I said instead. You don't have to go. She looked up at me then, like she hadn't expected that answer at all. The neighbor filed her report on a Tuesday. I didn't know that yet. I was at home making Kira's lunch for school, not thinking about Celine at all for once. What I know now, I only pieced together after. Greaves walked me through it later, step by step, the way you'd explain a fire after the smoke's already cleared. The county's filing went into the system the way these things do, quiet and procedural, landing in a database most people never think about. Celine's compliance software runs a nightly cross-check against every county and state filing tied to current employees, standard practice for a company carrying the kind of liability coverage we do. It's not dramatic. It's not anybody making a phone call in anger. It's just code, doing exactly what it was built to do. By Wednesday morning, the system had matched Vernell Boykin's name against an open county filing and flagged her employee file as non-disclosed under the duty of care policy. The same clause I'd read 3 times at my kitchen table weeks earlier. No human decided to flag it. No human needed to. An escalation report generated automatically. One signature required before any corrective process could move forward. Ownership. I think about that morning a lot now, how far away I was from all of it while it was happening. I was rinsing a juice box lid in my sink while 25 minutes away, a server somewhere was quietly assembling a document with my name on the authorization line. Tamika worked dispatch at the Pineville hub, handled most of the insurance and compliance paperwork that came through there, had for almost 2 years, the kind of job people forget exists until something inside it breaks. I wasn't there. I didn't see her open her queue that morning, Didn't see her scroll past the usual stack of shipping manifests and safety inspection logs to find something sitting at the top, flagged urgent. Something she'd never seen generate before in 2 years of doing that job. I didn't see her read Vernell's name on it. Didn't see whatever crossed her face when she got to the bottom of the form, to the line marked Required Signature. Owner of record, where a name sat that didn't belong to Mr. Whitcomb. Didn't belong to anybody she'd ever heard mentioned in a meeting or seen on a memo. O. Renfro. Greaves told me later that Tamika called him within 4 minutes of opening that document, her voice tight and confused, asking him flat out if there was some kind of mistake in the system. He said he didn't lie to her, said he also didn't tell her everything, just confirmed the name was correct and the report needed to move forward regardless. What he couldn't control, what none of us could control once that document landed, was what Tamika did the second she hung up the phone with him. She didn't call Greaves back. She didn't call HR. She called Vernell. Tamika called Vernell a little after 10 that morning, according to what I learned later, her voice already shaking before she got the question all the way out. "Do you know anybody named O. Renfro?" Vernell didn't. Not by that name, not at first. It took her a moment of turning it over before something cold settled into place. Renfro. My maiden name. A name she'd maybe heard once, years back, at a wedding, and never thought about again. "Why?" Vernell asked carefully. "Are you asking me that?" Tamika told her about the document, the flag, the signature line. Vernell went quiet long enough that Tamika asked if she was still there. What Vernell did next, she did out of fear, not malice. Called her son before she'd even finished sitting with the shock of it herself. Dwayne was at work, in a meeting with 2 account managers going over fourth quarter numbers, when his phone buzzed twice in a row. He stepped into the hallway to answer it, and I imagine, though I wasn't there, that whatever color was in his face left it somewhere in the first 30 seconds of that call. He called me right after. I was at my desk, 2 minutes into a meeting of my own, when my phone lit up with his name. I stepped out into the hallway the way he must have stepped into his. Octavia. Just my name, tight and strange. My mother just got a call from Tamika. Said there's some kind of report at her job. Said a name came up, Renfro. My stomach dropped, but I kept my voice even. "Okay. Is it true?" He said it fast, like the question had been sitting loaded in his mouth the whole walk to that hallway. "Tell me right now. Is it true?" I stood there in that hallway, phone pressed to my ear, 9 years of careful silence sitting in my chest like something finally cracking under its own weight. For the first time since the day we married, I didn't have a soft answer ready. I didn't reach for "it's complicated" or "we'll talk about it later." I opened my mouth. And for once, the truth was right there waiting instead of something gentler standing in front of it. That same afternoon, before I'd even made it home to face whatever was coming, Kira called me from her after-school program, her voice small on the other end of the line. "Mama, Daddy called Grandma's house, and he sounded really upset. I heard him say your name a lot." A pause, the kind kids leave when they're working up courage. "Are we in trouble?" I closed my eyes in that office hallway, phone now switched to her call. My daughter's voice asking the one question no 11-year-old should ever have to carry. "No, baby," I said, steadying myself. "Nobody's in trouble." I wasn't sure yet if that was true. Back on the other line, Dwayne was still waiting, breathing hard enough that I could hear it through the phone. "Octavia," he said again, quieter now. "Is it true?" Dwayne was waiting at the kitchen table when I got home, jacket still on, like he hadn't decided yet whether he was staying or walking back out. "Sit down," he said. Not unkind, just final. I sat. "Start from the beginning," he said. "I want all of it." My father co-signed a warehouse loan for me when I was 19. I kept my voice steady. Told me to keep my name off it. Said money talked about gets taken. 19 years old and you've been lying to me since the day we met. Not lying. Withholding. There's a difference, even if it doesn't feel like one right now. He laughed, short and humorless. That's exactly what Greaves said to you. Word for word, almost. I didn't flinch. Because it's true for both of us, apparently. So, you own it. The whole company, not some piece of it. All of it. He sat back, ran a hand over his face. And my mother's worked there, how long? 9 years. Since before we married. You knew that the whole time. I knew she worked there. I didn't dig into her file until after Christmas Eve. I want you to hear that part clearly, Dwayne. I didn't go looking for a reason to come after your mother. I went looking because my daughter stood outside in the cold for 11 minutes, and I needed to understand who I was dealing with. His jaw tightened. And what did you find? 2 write-ups, conduct complaints, over a year old. Both of them just stopped. Never escalated the way policy says they should have. You buried them? No. I held his eyes. Somebody else did. Before I even knew they existed. He went still. Somebody else. I let that sit a second longer than I needed to, weighing exactly how much further this conversation was about to go. Greaves found out who I was 3 years ago, I said finally. A signature audit. He's known the whole time we've been sitting across from your mother at every holiday. Dwayne's face shifted, something working behind his eyes that hadn't fully landed yet. 3 years. Yes. And he never said anything. To me, to her, to anybody. No. Why? He thought he was protecting me. Said a woman who hides what she owns probably doesn't want her name attached to firing her own family. Dwayne stood up so fast the chair scraped hard against the floor. He walked to the window, back to me, hands braced on the counter like he needed something solid under his palms. So this whole time, he said slowly, there's been a man at your own company quietly deciding what my mother gets held accountable for and what she doesn't, based on protecting you. Yes. He turned around. Whatever had been building in his face settled into something sharper, more pointed than anger, closer to dread. Did he know? Dwayne said. This whole time, before Christmas Eve, before any of this. Did Greaves already know what kind of woman my mother was at that job, and decide on his own that none of us needed to know it either? I didn't answer right away, because the honest answer meant deciding, right there at my own kitchen counter, whether I was about to protect one more secret, or finally let every single one of them fall where they landed. Yes, I said finally. He knew. Before Christmas Eve. Before any of it. He'd been softening complaints about your family for years, quietly, on his own, because he assumed that's what I'd want. Dwayne didn't move from the window. So your mother's behavior, the write-ups, whatever else might be sitting in that file. Somebody's been managing all of it, behind everybody's back. Yes. Not because you asked him to. No, I didn't even know it was happening until a few weeks ago. He shook his head slowly, like he was trying to physically work something loose. He thought staying quiet was loyalty. That's exactly what he said. Dwayne's eyes came up to meet mine, and something passed between us that hadn't been there a second earlier. Recognition, sharp and unwelcome. That's what I thought too, he said. Christmas Eve. I heard Kira crying through that wall, and I told myself getting up would only make things worse. Stir up more trouble than it solved. His voice dropped lower. I thought that was protecting somebody too. Neither of us said anything for a while after that. The kitchen held the kind of silence that isn't empty, just full of things neither person wants to be the first to name. I walked over to the refrigerator without entirely meaning to, needing something to do with my hands. That's when I saw it. a sheet of construction paper taped up that morning by Kira before school, a drawing she must have made in art class. Stick figures, careful crayon outlines. My family. Written across the top in her round, deliberate handwriting. Me, Dwayne. Herself in the middle, holding both our hands. A small dog we didn't even own yet. The one she'd been begging for since summer. No Vernell. Nobody had told her to leave anyone out. Nobody had even discussed the assignment with her at all, as far as I knew. She'd simply drawn the family she felt safe inside, and her grandmother hadn't made the cut. Not out of anger, just out of some quiet, 11-year-old logic that didn't require anybody's permission. I didn't say anything. I just stepped back so Dwayne could see it too. He stood there a long moment, studying it the way you study something you already understand but aren't ready to fully accept. She didn't even think about it, he said quietly. She just left her off. Kids don't lie about who feels safe, I said. They don't have the energy for it yet. He looked at the drawing a while longer, then back at me. Something different in his face now than the anger that had been sitting there all evening. Greaves thought silence was protecting you, he said slowly. I thought silence was keeping the peace. He gestured toward the fridge, toward that careful, unguarded drawing. And the only person in this whole mess who never said a word about any of it is the one who's been paying for it the longest. He sat back down at the table, quieter than I'd seen him in days, maybe longer. I'm starting to understand, he said, what silence actually costs people. Greaves called me 3 days later to walk me through what came next. The way he'd been doing since that first phone call, like he owed me a kind of transparency he hadn't offered anyone in years. Formal reviews are scheduled, he said. Vernell Thursday morning, Tamika Friday afternoon, separate meetings, separate findings, standard procedure from here. 2 HR staff in the room, union rep available if either of them wants one. Full documentation either way. Findings on both get delivered together. At the regular staff meeting Friday afternoon. Once Tamika's review wraps. And my role in that room is what? Exactly? None, if you don't want one. Your ownership. You can sit in if you choose to. Most owners don't, for exactly this kind of thing. Keeps the process clean. Keeps it about policy instead of personal history. I thought about that for a long moment. Some part of me, the part that had spent weeks collecting names and dates and buried files, wanted to be in that room. Wanted to watch. I won't be there, I said. Either day. You're sure? I'm sure. Whatever happens needs to happen because the policy says so, not because I walked in and made it happen. That's the only way this means anything. He didn't argue. I think in some way, he respected it. Maybe even understood it as the cleanest answer he'd gotten from me yet. Thursday came and went without a single call from anyone. I went to work, picked Kira up from school, made dinner. The strange, ordinary motions of a day happening on top of something enormous that I had no hand in steering anymore. Friday evening, I was rinsing dishes when headlights swept across our front window, too sharp and too sudden for anyone we were expecting. Vernell was at our door within a minute, hand raised to knock before I'd even reached it myself. I opened it to find her standing on the porch in her church coat, eyes red, voice already climbing before I'd said a word. You need to fix this, she said. Right now. Tonight. Vernell, don't. She stepped forward, close enough that I had to hold the door steady. Don't stand there acting like you don't know exactly what's happening to me. They're talking about my position. My position. Octavia. 9 years at that company, and some computer decides I need a formal review like I'm some stranger off the street. Dwayne appeared behind me in the hallway, going still when he saw who it was. I didn't make that decision, I said, keeping my voice level. The policy did. The same policy that's been on the books since before either of us worked there. Don't give me that, she snapped. You own the company. You can make one phone call and end this whole thing tonight, and you're standing here telling me you won't. I'm telling you it's not mine to end. Not this time. Her eyes moved past me to Dwayne, searching his face for something. Backup, maybe. The same silence he'd given her every other time this came up. Tell her, Vernell said, voice cracking now. Tell your wife to fix this. I watched Dwayne, waiting. My whole body braced for whichever direction this was about to break. Dwayne didn't speak. Not yet. He stood in that hallway, silent, the same way he'd stood silent in his mother's house on Christmas Eve. And something about that stillness gave me exactly the room I needed. Vernell, I said, keeping my voice even, almost gentle, the same register she'd used standing over my daughter on her own back porch. I think you're upset right now. I understand that. Don't talk to me like I'm a child. I'm not. I'm talking to you the way you talked to Kira that night. Calm, reasonable, like none of it was really that serious. She blinked, caught off guard by the shift. It's just a review, I went on. A process. Nobody's decided anything yet. You're getting worked up over something that hasn't even happened. That's not the same thing. Isn't it? I tilted my head slightly. You took a child's coat off her body and put her outside in 8-degree weather. And when I asked you about it, you told me it was just a joke. Nothing to get upset about. I'm only offering you the same comfort you offered her. Her mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since I'd known her, Vernell Boykin had nothing readily available to say. I'm not going to call anyone tonight, I continued. Not Greaves, not HR, not the review board. Whatever happens in that meeting happens because of choices you made, recorded by people who aren't me, going back over a year before any of this started. I didn't write those complaints. I didn't ignore them. Somebody else did that, for reasons that had nothing to do with you deserving better. You could still stop it, she said, quieter now, something closer to pleading creeping into her voice. One phone call, Octavia. That's all it would take. I know. I held her eyes. I'm choosing not to make it, the same way you chose not to open that door sooner. Her face crumpled, anger draining into something rawer, more frightened. 9 years, she whispered. 9 years, I worked at that place. And 11 minutes, I said, is how long my daughter stood outside in the cold while you ate dinner 20 feet away. The porch went silent, except for the wind moving through the trees behind her. I expected her to push further, to find some new angle, some new accusation to throw at the space between us. Instead, she just stood there, smaller somehow than she'd looked walking up the driveway, like the weight of her own words from that night had finally found their way back around to her. Behind me, I heard Dwayne shift his weight, felt him step out of the doorway and into the porch light beside me for the first time since she'd arrived. Mama, he said. Just that. One word. Quiet. But enough to make both of us turn toward him at once, waiting to see which side of this he was finally going to choose to stand on. Vernell turned to her son like he was the last solid ground left on that porch. Tell her, she said. Tell her this isn't right. Dwayne didn't look at me. He looked at his mother, and something in his face had gone very still, very careful, like a man choosing his footing before a long drop. Mama, he said, Christmas Eve, when you put Kira outside. We've been over this. We haven't, actually. His voice stayed quiet, but it didn't waver. Not really. Not all the way. Vernell crossed her arms, bracing. Don't you start too. I was in the next room, he said. I heard the door shut. I heard her crying through the wall, Mama, thin, like she was trying not to be heard, and couldn't help it anyway. He paused. I didn't get up. Dwayne, let me finish. His jaw tightened. I told myself it'd blow over. Told myself getting up and making it a whole thing would embarrass her. Embarrass everybody. Make Christmas worse than it needed to be. So I sat there. 11 minutes, Octavia tells me. I sat there for 11 minutes telling myself a story about why that was the right thing to do. Vernell's mouth opened, but nothing came out. It wasn't your joke that hurt her the worst that night, he said. And now his eyes did move to me, briefly, before going back to his mother. It was me, doing nothing while it happened. You said something cruel in a moment, Mama. I had 11 full minutes to fix it, and I chose comfort instead. That's worse. That's so much worse. And I've spent weeks letting you be the only one who has to carry this. You raised her since she was small, Vernell said, voice cracking now, smaller than I'd ever heard it. You're supposed to take my side. I raised her, he repeated. That's exactly the problem. I've been her father in every way that matters since she was 3 years old, and I forgot what that was supposed to mean for 11 minutes. I've been trying not to look at it ever since. The porch held a silence different from any that had come before it. Not tense exactly, just exhausted, like something heavy had finally been set down after being carried too long. Vernell looked between the two of us, and for the first time all evening, I watched the fight drain fully out of her shoulders. Not surrender. Just a woman realizing all at once that the room had run out of people willing to defend her unconditionally. So that's it, she said quietly. Both of you against me. Nobody's against you, Dwayne said. I'm just done pretending I wasn't part of it. She stood there a moment longer, hugging her coat tighter around herself in the cold night air, looking smaller against the porch light than she had even minutes ago. So, what happens to me now? She asked. The question came out thin, almost childlike, aimed at no one in particular. Not really to Dwayne, not really to me, more like she was asking it of the whole night itself. Neither of us answered right away. I wasn't there. I'd made that decision weeks earlier, and I held to it, even for this. But Greaves called me that evening and walked me through it slowly, like he understood I needed to hear it in order, start to finish, to believe it had actually happened. The Pineville hub held a staff meeting most Fridays anyway. Routine scheduling updates, nothing anyone paid much attention to. This one had been moved to the main floor instead of the usual back office, every shift represented. Close to 40 people standing or leaning against pallet racks at 4 p.m. Greaves said he kept his voice level, official, the same tone he'd use for any policy update. He didn't explain why. He simply announced that, effective immediately, the supervisory and customer-facing role at the Pineville hub was being restructured, with reassignment pending to a position with no direct staff oversight. Then he said Vernell's name. Greaves told me she was standing near the front, close enough that there was nowhere for her to go that wouldn't have looked like running. He said her face didn't change much at first, like she was still hoping it might be about somebody else, right up until he said her name plainly and the room's eyes shifted with his. 9 years of being the one who told people what to do, undone in the space of one sentence, in front of every person she'd ever corrected, scheduled, or stood over with a clipboard. Nobody needed the reason spelled out. Most of them already had their own theories, and the look on her face confirmed enough. Tamika's name came next, a brief mention of a retraining requirement tied to recent compliance updates, nothing singling her out beyond that. Greaves said her shoulders dropped with something closer to relief than dread. No change to her role. A second chance, clearly marked as exactly that, and vague enough that nobody in the room read it as punishment. He said the room didn't react loudly. No gasps, no whispers he could hear. Just a kind of stillness that told him everyone standing there understood enough of what they'd witnessed, even if nobody planned to discuss it out loud once they clocked out. Vernell didn't ask any questions, he said. Didn't argue, didn't request a private conversation, didn't do any of the things he'd half expected from a woman he'd watched run that floor with absolute confidence for almost a decade. She just nodded once, gathered her things from the small desk near the supervisor station, a desk that, as of that meeting, was no longer hers, and walked toward the exit. Greaves said a few people glanced her way as she passed. Most didn't. The room had already moved on to checking their phones, gathering jackets, the ordinary motion of a workday ending, as if nothing enormous had just happened in the middle of it. He watched her through the front windows after she left the building, said she stood in the parking lot for almost a full minute before getting into her car, not moving, not reaching for her phone, just standing there in the cold, the way somebody stands when they've finally run out of anywhere left to direct their anger. She didn't call anyone, as far as he knew. She didn't come to my house again either. She just drove away, alone, for maybe the first time in this entire story, looking exactly like what she was. A year passed quieter than the one before it. We didn't go to Vernell's for Christmas Eve this time. Didn't go anywhere, really. Just our own house, lights strung low along the porch railing, a fire going in the den, the three of us moving through the evening at whatever pace felt right, instead of whatever pace the holiday usually demanded. Kyra picked out her own outfit again, the way she had last year, except this time it was a soft red sweater, nothing she needed to prove anything by wearing. She'd grown an inch since Christmas Eve, taller now, a little more sure of herself in ways that had nothing to do with height. Dwayne spent most of the afternoon in the kitchen with her, the two of them making a mess of the counter trying to get a gingerbread house to stand up straight. I watched from the doorway for a while before he noticed me noticing, and waved me over instead of asking if I needed anything. "Wall's not gonna hold," Kira told him seriously, holding up a piece of candy cane like evidence. "It'll hold," he said. "We just gotta brace it." He did too, held the wall steady with one hand while she pressed the icing into place, patient in a way I hadn't seen from him in years, maybe ever. Small thing. The kind of small thing that means nothing on its own and everything stacked up against everything it replaced. Later, after Kira had gone to bed, he found me on the back porch, 2 mugs of something warm in his hands. "You good?" he asked, handing one over. "I'm good." He leaned against the railing beside me, quiet for a moment, looking out at the yard the way people look at things when they're really looking at something further off than that. "I keep thinking about that door," he said. "How easy it would have been to just open it." "You don't have to keep thinking about it." "I think I do. A little." He glanced at me. Keeps me honest about what I let slide and what I don't anymore. I thought about Greaves, about the quiet years he'd spent making decisions in my name that were never his to make, about my father's voice in that truck all those years ago, certain he was protecting me with every word. Good intentions, wrapped tight enough around silence that nobody noticed the shape they were actually taking. "I'm not hiding what I own anymore," I said. "Not from you, not at the company. Greaves knows it's out in the open now. No more burying anything on my behalf." "I noticed," Dwayne said. "Tamika told me you came to the hub last week. First time anybody there's seen your face." Felt strange, I admitted. Good strange. From inside the house, faint through the window, we heard Kyra laugh in her sleep. That particular, unguarded sound kids make when nothing in their dream is asking them to be careful. I hadn't heard that sound in over a year. Dwayne reached over and took my hand, and for once, I let the silence between us be the comfortable kind, instead of the kind either of us was managing. "My father told me to live simply and keep my worth a secret. He never said anything about keeping my peace a secret too, and that's the one thing I stopped hiding."